On behalf of the Canadian Tamil Congress, I would like to thank all of you for coming out today to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the atrocities that happened during the last stages of war. May 18th of every year is commemorated as Muli Vaikal Remembrance Day. It is a day to remember, mourn, and seek justice for the tens of thousands of Tamil civilians who lost their lives to the murderous military campaign by the Sri Lankan government in 2009.
Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. வாழ்க நிரந்தரம், வாழ்க தமிழ் மொழி, வாழிய வாழியவே. வாழ்க நிரந்தரம், வாழ்க தமிழ் மொழி, வாழிய வாழியவே. வானமளந்தனைத்தும் அளந்திடும் வன்மொழி, வாழிய வாழியவே.
May 18th is a day of remembrance for Tamils in Canada and around the world. Today, we mourn for the innocent life lost. Remember the families torn apart and left with no answers. According to UN report, during the last stages of the war, 40,000 to 70,000 people were killed or not accounted for in a war without witnesses. Journalists, along with UN observers, were banned as thousands were wiped out. 10 years later, the wounds linger of justice forgotten, human rights buried alongside the innocent.
உறுதி வடிந்த பொழுதுகளே நாம் குழறி அழுத இரவுகளே. குருதி வடிந்த பொழுதுகளே நாம் குழறி அழுத இரவுகளே.
This year marks a decade since the end of the armed conflict, where it is estimated that up to 70,000 Tamil civilians were killed. This is a shocking loss of life, and we know that there are also those who were injured or displaced and had to flee to countries like Canada, and we know that many still do not know what has happened to their loved ones. In cities and towns across Canada, in Sri Lanka, indeed in countries around the world where the Tamil diaspora has made a home, communities are remembering together and teaching their neighbors, their colleagues, their friends about what happened and about the work that still needs to be done. You are making sure that we remember. It is innocent people who pay the price when human rights are denied.
The war in Sri Lanka was a dark time where tens of thousands of civilians were caught in the conflict and became casualties of war. What I do know is that freedom isn't inherent to all human beings. Rights are not created by the government. The government can only recognize rights. Unfortunately, too often we see governments that fail to do so, and that is usually followed by periods of violence and war, which we saw in Sri Lanka.
And today we commemorate, 10 years later, the victims of that awful violence. I saw firsthand on Parliament Hill just a sense of what families were going through, looking for news of fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters. And so 10 years later, the best tribute that I think we can give to those victims is to fight for justice in their memory. That means demanding of the Sri Lankan government that they cease all human rights violations taking place in Sri Lanka.
As we mark the 10th anniversary of the end of the armed conflict in Sri Lanka, I'm joined by my colleagues from all parties to ensure that we continue to fight for justice. We often talk about reconciliation, and it's a term that is very much open for discussion. But reconciliation does not mean that the perpetrator reconciles. It's about ensuring the victim community is ready to reconcile.
Remember, 10 years since the end of the Sri Lankan armed conflict, and still there is no peace and reconciliation. I want to say that I stand together with Canada's Tamil diaspora in that call for peace and reconciliation, that the UN step up and look to hold those who were the perpetrators to account. And that begins with an investigation.
As we commemorate the 10th anniversary, I just want to assure the Tamil community here in Canada that we will always stand shoulder to shoulder to make sure that there is a road to reconciliation and there is justice.
After 26 years of war, I saw the devastation. I went from Colombo up to Jaffna, to Trichomali. I met with the Mahanayaks, and then I came back to Colombo. We met with parliamentarians, we met with the military. We were a multi-party group, and we asked tough questions.